Dignitaries, the Vice Chancellor, Professor Faizan Mustafa, respected teachers and my students present here. On behalf of the organizing committee of Nalsar, we would like to welcome Professor G. Aloysius, who is here to speak about law and caste and its historical and sociological development in India. Sir is a non-institutional academician and theoretician on nationalism. His influential works include Nationalism Without A Nation in India, Religion as an Emancipatory Identity. He has also taken up the Herculean task of translating Perrier's works into English. He's also published a number of booklets via Critical Quest and articles in Myriad national and international journals on aspects such as sociological aspects of Indian nationalism, cultural politics of caste, caste-based movements in South India, and on questions pertaining to tribal autonomy and identity. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Sir. Request Sir to take over.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, friends, I'm so happy to be in front of you. This is my third time I think I am addressing all of you. And Professor has taken the trouble to come and sit here. That has given me a lot of courage, interest, but also certain warning, how you should go about it and all that. But I, being without any institutional background, I have nothing to lose. So I would say what I believe and so on. You see? I'm supposed to speak on caste and law. I'm sure you must be people who will be much more well versed with whatever the connections between caste and law and all that. But I like to put in a certain historical and sociological point of view, whether that may add to whatever you know already, that is for you to judge and question, challenge, etc., etc. First of all, I would like to propose what's the meaning of caste? No, what's the meaning of caste? And what its implications, secondly, for law enforcing agencies and so on. What has it been in history? That is more important for me. Caste, as you know, is a word that combines both what is known as endogamous groups called Jati, and also an ideology called Varna. Combined together is a short, caste is a kind of short note to show that it is endogamous groups brought ideologically within a hierarchical ranking order and so on, which is a short name for caste, for meaning of caste. I would like to propose that caste is basically law. Caste is basically law. Because the whole idea of Varna ideology is that people are born under different circumstances and differently, and this difference in their birth circumstances, what we call ascriptive circumstances, is relevant for constructing the socio-political and cultural organizations. And these different circumstances imply that they are also part of their nature, inner nature. And therefore, from this very idea emerges the idea that you ought to keep to it. You ought to keep to it. This is the very core of Varna ideology. People are all born different. Of course, this has been explained severally. People have what you call certain qualities like Rajas, Tamas, Tejas, and all that kind of thing. It goes on in the Shastric texts and so on. But the core ideology is, which was enunciated later by Mr. Gandhi, that people are all born differently and the difference should be maintained. And that in short is called dharma. That is called short dharma. And moving away from your own inner nature is adharma. Moving away from inner nature is adharma. And this one element dominating in one person is passed on genetically from generation to generation. You see? This is a construction. And this is what it is. And that should not be disturbed. Now, obviously, this is a normative proposition. And further, how do we know that what is my inner capacity, what is my inner nature is this is drawn from how society is structured. It's not from everybody reflecting over or through experience finding out what I am capable of, which is my best for me, but from the way society itself is structured, and further how it is interpreted by the Brahminical leadership in the country. You see? So the first idea is people are all having different aptitudes, one aptitude among the several of them dominating in each person, and this is passed on from generation to generation genetically, hereditarily. And how do we come to know of this is by the existing order of castes, secondly by the interpretation, Brahminical interpretation through texts, etc., etc. And this is religiously legitimated because it is called dharma. In India, for example, we don't have religion, we have dharma. And dharma means that. And it has all the characteristics which we attribute to religion, in the sense that it should not be questioned, your will should be brought in to obey, not your intellect to question this and so on. You see? And it is the most feared circumstances is this different characteristics getting mixed up. Different characteristics getting mixed up, and people even in their different places moving crisscross, taking to other jobs, marrying people and all that is a very dangerous thing. Aren't you remembered of cattle breeding? It should be a breeding. Caste is a breed. Pedigreed, dogs, cats and so on. That precisely is that. Nothing more or nothing less. You see, nothing more or nothing less. There's no need to honeycomb saying that it's a natural order, it's a divinely ordained order and so on. But it all boils down to the same. For our purpose is to understand, this is what is called in the North India parlance would be known as okat. No? And that is a currency. It's not somebody puts it somewhere and then who thinks about all this and all that. No. Okat is the most popular word used in the common parlance in North India. People are, you know you are okat. That simple words bring the whole burden of what is meant to be within that. Whoever says that the Hindu religion has no belief system, we all swear by the belief in caste. And the practice of caste is mandatory. It's a prescriptive order. It's one and the same time. It's a cognitive order. Reality, human reality is constituted this way. People are different by terms of the various virtues and so on and so on. But from this very isness, from the very nature, core, is derived what ought to be. So the isness should coincide with the oughtness. What is real is, in other words, rational ideal. So there is no ideal separate from this real, and the ideal is derived from the real, and it's always a conflict that we are unable to realize the real. So our mandate is to bring together this ideal and then observe the dharma. This roughly is the philosophy. Not as I don't derive this from ancient texts or ancient sastras, that they are bad enough. But then such bad sastras and so on are found in other contexts also, other religions also. I'm not bothered about that. But my own, where do I derive this from is the way the whole thing re-emerged in the context of colonial Orientalist notions, and how this has been taken up and affirmed by our nationalist leaders, scholars and politicians, etc., etc. Now, for our purpose, it is very clear that this is a prescriptive order, this is a normative order, and which is the essence of law. This is the essence of law. And along with that, what goes is this? A sanction. A sanction. Law is not effective unless there is a sanction to it. You see? I mean, I propose this is the ideal order, people can choose to do it or not. No, it's not like that. Here you are given an order to obey. And you are aware of several stories of old, how people crisscrossing this and taking to different things have been punished. But more important is, who is supposed to impose the sanction and see to it that Varna Ashrama Dharma is observed is the king. In modern parlance, it is the government. You see? All the stories you have, ancient times you hear the king wants to go on an invasion and take up other lands. And he would ask the Brahmins nearby, would you follow me if I go and capture? But the Brahmins would lay the conditions. If you go, first of all, you should capture, and we will not be part of that struggle for capturing. Okay? Now, after capturing, you should clearly establish a Varna order there. Which means our priority, our privileges and our place within society should be assured. If you grant that, I would come. You see? And then of course the king will definitely would say, and then he would bring in set the order. So the Kshatriya or the king is supposed to be the guarantor of this Varnashrama Dharma. And he will definitely punish people going against this Varna order. And the society itself will boycott through various means people who go against the caste order. This is roughly the thing. The way I try to suggest is to show the close affiliation with the caste as law. Is it basically as law? Now, where was this in our country? Today, for example, thinking back, we know that the common understanding we have is that India is basically casteist. From Kashmir to Kanyakumari, there is one caste system, and it has been there for 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years, Sanatan times. And the British came and gave us some little bit light has been produced, and we are slowly struggling to move out of it and all. And this way of presenting reality has been very favorable, very kind of convenient. Not only people who enjoy the privileges and are benefiting by caste, but also by people who are struggling against caste. Have been struggling against caste and to get rid of caste to present reality like this. But with a lot of developments in history, sociology and so on, it has become very clear it is nothing of the sort. India was nothing of the sort. And this Varna ideology is an aspiration and the desire of maybe some Brahmanical people with some texts and so. I don't know what is the relation between the texts and the Brahmins. Also were very nebulous. Who are these people? But all this came to be sealed and saved for much later period. So what was the pre-modern country like? The caste law operated where, when and how? Obviously, caste law operated only in those places where surplus could be more in production. This is a logic of the circumstances which I wanted to grasp little more, and this is confirmed by recent historiography also. I'll come to that little later. For example, in vast parts of India, if 10 people struggle to produce some sustenance, hardly 10 people can eat. It's 8, 9, and in scarce times and famine times, only 4 or 5 people could be able to eat and move on, so on. The rains come and so on. But on the other hand, in certain specific spots of India, this is what we call where the harvests were 3 times, 4 times and so on, where if 5 people work, 10 people can easily eat. You see? This is what we call valley areas. Gangetic Valley, Nirmada, Narmada, Tapti, Godavari, Krishna, and coming down to Kaveri and all that kind of thing. See, this distinction understanding a valley area and also a non-valley area is very crucial to our understanding, because Brahmanical way of life and the view of life is possible to be realized only in those places where surplus could be produced. In other areas, there was some effort to move. As I suggested, the kings will try to go into forest areas and establish new kingdoms and so on. But it was always extremely limited by the concrete, existential situation of food being not available. And everybody was forced to work to produce and labor and so on. This Brahmanical ideology of relaxed and sitting way of life, extracting the surplus from others and enjoying and elaborating Vedas and Upanishads and so on, that privilege was not available. So in pre-modern India, I suggest caste as law was available only in certain areas. Vast areas of which indication we can even see even today. Telangana caste system is not as strong, as you find, as in the coastal Andhra caste system. The more strict order and the separations are strict, and then Uru, Cheri and all that is very clearly delineated and so on and so forth. And this was very clear in the Gangetic thing and the other river valleys and so on. See, I tell you one small example from the research of a man, how the whole thing got to be changed when the British came. David Ludden, Professor David Ludden, studied peasant history of India, suggests one small example, and his dilemma and the way he solved the dilemma would trigger off this explanation. In Tirunelveli district, southern Tamil Nadu, there is clearly two different areas. One is the river Tamarabarani and the valley alongside and the fertile area and so on. And the vast desert kind of thing where the thorns and other kinds of things grow, where people have to live by very different means and so on. A British collector, gets transferred from the fertile area to the desertified area. And now he has an agenda of building roads on the side, on the area, and he goes to the villages and asks, where are the parayas here? Sir, why do you seek parayas? Because I want begari, I want free labor. So he goes to the village of the paraya people and then said, tomorrow we will start building the road, so we want some of you to come and do the thing. They respond, what do we have to do? Why? Aren't you, then this guy says, aren't you parayas? Yeah, we are all paraya people. So you have to do begari. No, whoever says we have to do begari. You ask for laborers, people will come from our community or any community that is available around, and then you pay them. No. Paraya means an untouchable. An untouchable's duty is to engage in begari, that is free labor. These people tried to explain to this collector, sir, you are coming from a wet area where in the scarce famine times, people used to travel from here and go and join the society there. The entrance is on the acceptance of my untouchable state, the status of being an untouchable, and go into the lowest rung of the ladder, social ladder, on condition that I remain an untouchable and also do begari. They do that, but we are not that. We are here struggling with various kinds of things, with various elements in our nature and so on and so forth. We don't have to. But the British collector's logic was very clear. Aren't you paraya? Whether you are here or there, you are a paraya. Therefore, you are an untouchable. Therefore, you should do begari. It is a very clear case that in India, there were two different systems. One is written by Kathleen Gu, who studied Tanjore area, some of you might remember. And there the strict Varna order being established and the very kind of stratification and so on and so forth. And of late, Nicholas Dark, another author, come to study Pudukottai, which is a dry area. There he studied and found out power is not exercised, not according to what he call Varna order. It is it's exercised according to at what time the people had what power in their hands, actual power. In the saying, for example, some community had a lot of cattle herds, so it became very rich and powerful. Or some other community was occupying a very strategic place, so it was powerful at that point in time. Somebody did some special service to the king, so they became part of the army and so became a king. That means, in other words, there were multiple reasons, different factors that make a particular community powerful for a time and space, and there was no fixed kind of social hierarchy based on birth ascriptivities, and which was the dominant situation in these valley areas because of the logic of production of surplus values. But the British the touch of the British did something magic to the subcontinent. This is very important for many of us are struggling with today's problem, because my starting point as in many other things is today. In fact, the way we construct the past depends on what we are having today. Very simple example is, Akbar, what did he do? Created Deen Ilahi. This all school people will know. We have read this. Akbar did several other things. But today what we remember is Deen Ilahi. You know why? In the 20th century, early 20th century, we were all loaded with communalism. And the most important thing was that we show that this efforts to bring people together was there always. So we have to construct a lineage and show that Akbar at that time created a Deen Ilahi. Writing history is so much conditioned by our present practice. This must be remembered. These are all constructions. Formerly used to say past is the father of the present, but the new historiography would say present is the father of the past. These are all various ways of constructing the past only. So the way we construct our past is very, very important for solving the problem of today and the future. The first 1 century, for example, I have been doing this in all my talks about various other social justice, liberation, and rights of minorities, Dalits, etc., rights and so on, to understand what the British did to us in the course of 1 century, beginning from 1757 to 1857. 1 century of company rule. Company rule colonialism was extremely important and is very, very serious for our understanding of later history. Because most of us are today interested in reading what the British did later by terms of giving reservations, some positions, some concessions, etc. to lower caste minorities, etc., etc. And from that we make a conclusion saying that if the British had not come, we would not have got anything at all. Valorizing the British rule to what the British rule did to other people. But it is very much important to see what the century that went before did. A mass debasement, a mass degradation of the entire mass of people here, deprivation and desolation. And then the 2nd century, a symbolic, cosmetic and very, very extremely marginal empowerment of small groups of people. And that is the context in which that we are sort of arguing today. The 1st century of the company rule obviously it came for what you call collecting revenue. And as I very earlier pointed out, revenue, where could revenue be? What could revenue could have been in Telangana? It's only coastal Andhra had a revenue. And then it's all the other valleys and Narmada Valley, Dapti Valley and Gangetic Valley, people had a revenue. So in the revenues, the British having finished up all their, the Rajas and Maharajas and so on, found only one set of people, that is the Brahmanical groups, as more organized, and the British found them as the only group capable of delivering uninterrupted revenue, the sole reason for which the British came. This is important to see. So they made a compact with those people saying that we won't interfere in what you are doing, but pay us revenue. And if anybody troubles you in your revenue collection, we will come and back you up. This was a simple contract with the people for collecting revenue. But collecting revenue was the sole reason why the British was there. And so the collecting revenue and the contract devised for collecting revenue became the principle of governance itself. Governance itself. Other things the people never bothered. So through association of this group of people, by giving revenue to the British, became the junior partners in the new regime that started emerging. This was an area through which these people got enormously consolidated and became part of the British in more senses than one, because it was the same time in Europe the question of Aryan race was being discovered. This is called the second renaissance of Europe. They recognized themselves as being Aryans, and the discovery of Orientalism came to identify that the one branch of Aryans came to India and the other branch came to Europe. So the materialist Aryans of the West came to join hands with the spiritualist hands of the Aryan in the East, in India. And the brotherhood was called, the Sangam was celebrated as something unique and fantastic, as the providential government that came, that elevated us from nothing to everything. You see? This is the emergence of our middle classes in India. And several parallels were worked out imaginatively. The British had to rule, or the company had to come exercise its judiciary. So they said, I am governed by biblical rules, and it will be interpreted by the priests. And a Muslim is ruled by Quran, and it will be interpreted by mullahs and others. So what will this mass of diversified mass and scattered people, what are they supposed to be? How are they supposed to be governed? They had a European parallel and found out these people will be called Hindus. This is a historic occasion where the first stage of conversion to Hinduism taking place. Who is a Hindu? Who is not identified as Christian and who is not identified as a Muslim is a Hindu. And to this day you have this definition in the statute books. Nobody asked us, what are you? Nobody volunteered the information that we are either Hindus or we are not Hindus, or we could have something else or nothing like that. We are all Hindus. It's a government, the colonial regime determination. Then we start constructing this Hindu community. In the disputes, Muslims are judged by the priests, and the Muslims are judged by the mullahs and Maulvis. And what happens to this now emerged reality of Hindus? Of course, it will be Brahmins. There's a parallel being developed. You have a priesthood, you have a community, now you have to find a language. You have the discovery of the language. They found the Greek, and the Greek was the origin of all those languages, European languages. So they thought it must be the same in the subcontinent also. So they went in search for this and obviously landed in Sanskrit. They said all other languages, present languages, are derived from Sanskrit. There's absolutely no parallel in truth, but this is how this came to be imposed. Sanskrit is the language from which all our languages are derived and so on. Now you have to look for text. Where do we look for the text? We have a Quran, this guy has a Quran, we have a Bible. What do you have? As Iyothee Thassar very beautifully puts, they all scratched their tuft of hair and then went home, collected bundles and bundles of moth-eaten, half preserved, long forgotten kind of palm leaves and put them all in front. And the British, with all reverence due to a text, carried them all to where, the School of Oriental and African Studies, and the scholar called Max Muller sat together religiously, worked out a religiosity not capable of anybody who was supposed to be believing and practicing any one of those things said in those things, and brought out 56 volumes of the sacred books of the East. When the 56 volumes of the sacred books of the East come, your chest expands enormously. Oh, you have only small book, and your Bible is something maybe bigger than that slightly. But the whole wisdom We have enough in this to teach the entire world. As the Aryans, we are the top of the world, and we are part of the Aryans, we could do this. You see? The entire scattered people of the country have been termed Hindus and given a text, and the first definition was a residual definition. This has to be remembered and emphasized. It's not simply said that to whom this law applies to so and so, so and so, so and so. And what is the serious structural and religious implication is, one who is not a Muslim, one who is not a thing. However, somebody clamors that I am a Buddhist, I should be governed by a Buddhist person. Allah, nothing doing, you are part of this. You see? Then later another interpretation came, that for Hindu, who is a Hindu, they are saying that all guys living in this country are called Hindus. This is a Hindustan, people living in this country are Hindus, okay, that's okay. Now, somebody going to temple, somebody going to mosque, somebody going to church, somebody not going any place. But all these guys are Hindus. Geographical notion of Hindus. You see? And finally, Mr. Gandhi comes and says, if you have determined that all the entire population is Hindus. Now the question is, if you call yourself a Hindu, you have no option, mind you, except to call yourself Hindus. If you call yourself a Hindu, you have to abide by the Vedas and the Vedas. The Caste law is coming. Caste law is coming. So you have a residual understanding of the majority of people, geographical understanding of a majority of people, and have a conditional critical understanding of majority of people. As a sliding scale, we use the sliding scale whenever is possible. No, Hinduism means it's an inclusive, means everybody and all that. But at the same time, it also means you have to abide by caste and Vedas and so on. See. Now, through the structural unification of the revenue collecting groups with the modernizing modern British, what has happened is these people consolidated themselves across the country and emerged as a modern middle class and started to filling in all the newly emerging spheres, etc., etc. Through this mega process, of which there is a number of examples and so on. One of them, of course, mainly is this the idea that every religion to be found in this country is part and parcel of Hinduism. It's a part of Hinduism only. Including Buddhism is part of Hinduism. Hinduism is an inclusive kind of thing. So on. It has become a singular India was evolved. Singular India was evolved, I say, not only in terms of boundary and in terms of one army and one administration. Singular way of understanding India, and this way of understanding India was derived from the British's contract with the people at the valley who had a hierarchical way of and view of life, and that sectarian way and view of life became uniformly applied to the entire subcontinent. When we have one India, not only one India united by the boundary and the rule of the British, but in one India qualitatively in terms of substance united as having one India where caste law became the law of the entire country. Became the law of the entire country. In pre-modern times it was limited, as I said, to where it was possible. But the modernizing British, through its allegiances to alliances with this group of people, made it possible to make it appear that there is one India. We are united, we are a unique people. You know that, remember? Social sciences should not come near us. Which has some generalization about social change, social stratification and all that. And to find where the India is located itself in this and so on. No. We are one, you are unique and Baat Kalash. Finished. That's the end of the whole discussion. So that means we have one India, we have one secularism, we have one modernity. We have all one, and it's not under any general laws or generally accepted meanings and principles and implications of concepts and all that we use and so on. This has become. I'll give you an example. The British were never interfered. So they took up all the temples because a lot of money was coming from the temples, they took up the money in temples. A festival came. So the British will ask, what is done in this festival? I don't want to look, I don't want to interfere, but I should do what is traditionally done. You see? So they'll say that in such a festival, some 50 Brahmins would be fed as part of the festival. Oh, 50 Brahmins, definitely that should be the thing. But one problem is, 50 Brahmins were fed by a petty king. No. I am a representative of Queen Victoria. And it's an insult to me to feed 50 Brahmins. So I will feed 50,000 Brahmins. Look here, I am not interfering. I am only doing what is. So the entire, through such processes, what has happened is that one India, according to the way and view of life, has become Brahmanical, which simply means that caste law, which was limited to only some places, got integrated structurally and culturally as a unique social system. And this is, in other words, it will be called affirmative Orientalism, positive Orientalism. Some of you may be introduced to Edward Said's Orientalism and so on, which is non-problematically lifted to Indian scenario and then say these are all this. Nothing of the sort. In Arab, actually the Edward Said's contention was the Arabs' challenge to the Western hegemony. And so the West was constrained to devise and produce an Arabic picture as a kind of Orientalist and a debased picture. Here there was no challenge at all. Here there was mostly, and the crude word is dalali, benefit by the association, by the thinking people. So the British produced two pictures. One is affirmative Orientalism, another is negative Orientalism. Negative Orientalism concerned, this is all basket case. India is a basket case. Lot of castes and communities of warring communities. You can't makes any sense out of it. On the one hand. On the other hand, India is a seamless, timeless civilization unfolding itself in the Aryan civilization, covering not only India, the outside and so on. So what has happened is this seamless and timeless civilization came to take in charge of the basket case, that is the congeries of castes and communities. And their way and view of life, which includes caste as law, became more the thing. That is why we find the entire group of nationalists, you can see from the beginning, in fact, the beginning of our so-called anti-colonial nationalism itself is a rather ambiguous. Historiography has come up with this. I have only synthesized historiography for my purpose and so on. When at the end of the entire valorization, consolidation of a certain Brahmanical groups as the partner in the Raj, the people lost everything. People lost not only the tradition, because they have been cultivating the land for generations together without nobody bothering how they do it, what are the things and so on. And people will be interested in their case only when the harvest comes, piled up, how many tokaris, how many baskets for the local mason, how many baskets for the local jamindar, how many baskets for the king. Once the distribution is over, forget about it. Who does what and all that is none of anybody's problem. But now, these people who call themselves jamindars or rayatwars received a patta in hand, which means they have a piece of paper. So for any of people's arguments and contestation, they will have a piece of paper to show, which is against them. You see, it's a new way of ruling, no? And the old way of ruling was sword wielding, and the new way of ruling is pen pushing. And so that means a shift from one group of people who could wield swords to another group of people who were traditional occupation was pen pushing. So pen pushing became an extremely important occupation and preoccupation, and it goes in the name of merit, in the name of skill and all that, got integrated into admission right from services to manufacture, and everything is one singular test is needed, which is pen pushing. You see? There are a number of other ways which we can discuss later on some other occasion, by which caste law as was operating and the aspirations of the Brahmanical caste groups became, through the contractual arrangement with the British, became entire thing. This has been termed by Christopher Fuller, who says it is true that in the colonial times, Indian society was brought closer to the texts, Sanskritic texts. And inimitable M.N. Srinivas of fame suggested Varnashrama Dharma became very popular during the colonial period. I don't know what he meant by popular, that is his term, but it definitely became much more, which means caste law, which was not there available for all in a simple and a straightforward sense, now is everywhere. Caste law earlier, people could run away. When some place that are oppressing you so much, you can run away. But now there is no exit. There is no exit. We are trapped. From boundary to boundary, caste law. And where do we identify it? Identify it in the very fact, the beginning of our nationalism, the start of our anti-colonial nationalism itself. You can contextualize it when the British started behaving differently from what they were doing in the previous century when the parliament took over the country. Earlier the practice was the British will never talk to the lower castes and small minorities and tribals and all that. Having established the leadership of the top people as the Brahmanical leadership, the plum posts and the resources and the privileges will be handed over to the first benchers and asked, please pass it on to the rest. Of course, it will never go beyond the second bench, but it's not my problem, it's your problem. So that when the clamor in the beginning, in the third quarter of the 19th century, clamor rose from corner to corner. I have lost everything, not only in land and political economy, but in the new thing also. New thing of education, employment and political representation. So I must be given something. Then the British started changing the rule marginally and then cosmetically and with the sole purpose of saving their own skin. Otherwise they will have to run. So it was the time we see that Macaulay's procedure rules started coming. Earlier it was the Gentoo code based on Manusmriti was the law for all. That I am sure you must have read that. But now 1864 the Macaulay's things come in, and that is a period when you start what you call moving that tenancy laws are being established. You cannot evict a tenant as you will and things like that. And some concession first to Muslims are given. We took the kingdom from you, and so some concession, Hunter Commission, etc., started coming. Oh, that cannot be tolerated. Because the tradition which has been established, legitimized, naturalized, structuralized by the company rule British was that it is a Brahmanical order, that is the India's social order, and within that, how dare the foreign rulers speak to the last benchers? You see? Started throwing crumbs to the last bench. He is going against custom and tradition. Our religion is in danger, so the British should go. The birth of anti-colonial nationalism. However ambiguously, however in a minor and a marginal way, the lower, relegated, and which is the mass of people were making a bid to entry into the emerging civil society, and that was opposed in the name of anti-colonial nationalism. That is the first point. Beginning with that, every social reform legislation which was very tortuously and in a kind of very ambiguous manner brought up by the British was objected to by the dominant elite, which has by now been emerging as a nationalist. Saying, who is he to interfere in us? We will take care of all that when these guys leave. But by the time, as I said, lot of movements have started, from looting grains to constructing Buddhism, a new interpretation of Hinduism, and also saying that we are neither Hindus nor Muslims, but we are Tamils, we are Bengalis or something like that. Now all this was opposed by the thing. So an actor has emerged in which now we have three actors. The colonial regime and the erstwhile companion of the British, the dominant groups, for whom the regime which was providential till yesterday, overnight became satanic. Satanic thing, it has to be kicked out. Yeah. But unfortunately, there was a third man also, is the emerging arrivistas, the new arrivistas, the small group that is struggling and all that. So the three-cornered fight, it looked very often, and it was true, that it is possible for the dominant groups to handle the British so easily. But they found it extremely difficult to handle the large amount of masses clamoring for all kinds of things. In the course of the ruling, the British said, okay, some group is clamoring. They said, okay, Muslims are clamoring, give little bit to the Muslims. And the South Indians saw this Muslims are getting something. The non-Brahmins got up and said, we shall also get something. So, okay, you get something else also. So, some Christians also, minorities, they get something else. Any group struggled, they got something and distribute. Finally, what happened when the British looked into their own hands, there was nothing left for them to take home. Having distributed to different groups, and they started packing up their bags. This is the decolonization. Decolonization never took place on the rhetoric of some people. Some people went to London, learnt Rousseau, Locke and all that sort of thing, absorbed beautiful modern ideas, and here they said that the British should go. That may be true. But the context in which the whole thing was occurred was, there was an incessant, pervasive bid by the relegated masses, scattered as various groups and so on, to emerge in civil society, and that was the context that the anti-colonialism emerged. And the British also said, if I have to distribute all what I collect to everyone here, what is it in it for me? You guys manage yourself, I will run away from this. This is anti-colonialism. Now, with that, what has happened, as I suggested, is that retrieving the tradition, bringing back our what is noble heritage became unilateral, monolithic, and to be plain Brahmanical. And the singular most identifier and articulator is Mr. Gandhi, but it was available all through in everybody. You should not teach women, educate women, we will lose our nationality. These are all names of some of the books we have published. Please, if you have some time to read that. And you know, we have an incident in Tilak's life. He was fighting against the post-puberty marriage bill. Children should be married only after puberty and all that. So, in runs Tilak's daughter. He said, Papa, will you also marry me off now? He said, no, darling, this is not for you. This is for the masses out there somewhere. Very clearly, the distinction was class and mass. One rule for class, another rule for the mass, which is today also. Globalization is for the classes and the what you call anti-globalization for the masses. English medium for my children, and you people are local mediums and all. Tiered arrangement of society. You know, all people will be educated, but some will be super educated, CBSE. And there will be below that, there will be state board, below that this, below that this. Exact reproduction of Varnashram Dharma. The constitutional view of Indian population is, we construct it from below, SCs, STs, whatever be the clamor of the ST group, you will be clubbed with the SC group only, and entitled for the same benefits, nothing more. Then construct BC, the residual castes. Of course not. In practice it will be called general castes or high castes and so on. So the constitutional view of Indian population itself is three-tiered. And then reproduction of this, there are recently some article, languages is constructed hierarchically again. It's again from Hindi and English only, everything, Sanskrit only, everything comes. So you have a second level official languages, second rate, and then third level dialects and so on and so forth. Hindi, for example, if you knew, it's a collection of today 48 mutually intelligible languages. It's called Hindi. Earlier, the number was 64. But many people realized the fraud involved in this and then withdrew themselves. No, we are a Bhojpuria. We have nothing to do with Hindi. And then we are Rajasthani and we are Punjabis and so on. Slowly, now we have 48 people included in that. And the fact that they are mutually intelligible said, it is not mutually intelligible at all. Mutual intelligibility comes into play only when these different language speaking people come into educational sphere. When they don't come into educational sphere, an old woman, village woman, illiterate woman of one language cannot understand the speech of another illiterate woman of speaking another language. You see? So many such things, just as the way they have put together Hinduism and Hindustan and Hindi, the whole thing is structured that way. You see? Now what you have talked about, this ideological formation of caste as law, going through all this and structured this. But we have a modern law. We have a modern law in everywhere. And that's what we are all studying, sir. What do you say something about it? Certainly. Now, which is the strong thing? This modern law is, of course, originating from the West, is taken over along with, we took over institutions and so on, is set up on our heads on the presumed understanding that society has transformed itself into individuation, into secularization, into kind of what you call consciously become liberal democracy. It is subsequent to that law, simultaneous to that, subsequent to that. But here, having ideologically brought back this pre-modern ideology and filled it within the governmental regime through policies and through statements and so on, sabotaging the modern institution as such, what power the modern law would have? You see? I remember a statement when there was a lot of what you call this honor killing was going on. A group of people from Haryana said, by all means arrest us. Because most of the arresting officers are our sons. No problem. But that doesn't mean we will stop having this Kap Panchayat. This will go on. This will go on. And very often what we see that some kind of academic justification of caste, I can spend 3 hours and say how the academic justifies caste, reproduces and so on. I don't want to go into that. But various other ways of mitigating caste. Caste means only untouchability. Untouchability means only this, excepting within the sacred realm of temple and all that. That is not applicable. So very specific act. Caste itself is a very way of what you call, it's the way we organize our society. You are suggesting that we should be like France or what? Why should we be like France? Why should we be imitated? We should keep to our originality, our original synthesis, our original genius, which is basically caste. What I am saying is the original genius of India is a plurality, diversity. Alchin and Alchin, the scholars of archaeology, were very clearly said, before the coming of the Aryans, India had set its basic pattern which survives today, which is diversity, basically based on geography, geomorphosity and so on and so forth. On that we have established this unifying ideology. What I am suggesting is the modern law is extremely weak. And they are very reluctant to work. And that's one of the reasons why today you file a case and your son may reap a benefit or your grandson may reap a benefit. They tell you clearly. It's not at all possible. And there are so many ifs. If there is a law is there, and then what is the function of rules under the law? They have, or very often they do the opposite function of curtailing and all that. There are a number of ways by which to say that the so-called indigenous law, this was tried a little bit by Werner Minsky, the return of the indigenous law, as opposed to Mark Galanter. We said the indigenous law is defeated and we have asserted modernity and all that. But I still believe Werner Minsky's was little more. The undercurrent, the deeply determining, the strong ideological thrust that defines law, determines law, explains law, mitigates law and aggravates law is this ideology of caste as law. Of course, with the necessary identifications and so on, corrections required for the modern thing and so on. It is this, how do we go to confront, and this how do we going to roll back is the question today, and we are all here to discuss that. Thank you very much. Please shoot.
Now the floor is open to your question and answer session.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I'm a lecturer. So, for that talk where you're integrating. Okay. So.
No, thank you for presenting the argument in such a way which integrates arguments from different perspectives. It's a skill set that we are trying to learn and we are trying to consciously cultivate amongst our students also. So just to take you up on the last point that you made, because I think it flows from your discussion about how Werner Minsky defends the indigenous foundations of law. So largely most of his work has concentrated on personal law or family law in the sense of customs which govern marriage, divorce, inheritance, succession. And he offers a counter to Mark Galanter, who says that at the time of independence, we consciously chose to continue with the colonial model when it came to our procedural laws, our revenue laws, and our substantive law. So isn't that actually a case of two scholars talking past each other? Because it's a fascinating question for me, because when you ask the question about the legitimacy of the legal system, very often we are struggling with this idea that you have raised, that ultimately it seems to be based on a foundation of foreign legal concepts, which are not internal to our culture. But at the formal level, the argument seems to be that there is this presumptive separation between public and private. And to a large extent, people have learned how to negotiate this foreign law when it comes to the public sphere of revenue law, criminal law, land law. Whereas when it comes to more close private disputes, we are more likely to go to our customary forums. So I know there's a lot of scholarship on it, but I wasn't very clear as to how you were arriving at that position, that you favor Werner Minsky's views as opposed to that of Mark Galanter.
This is very interesting, and I wouldn't be able to go deep into it because slightly later I found Minsky shifting from somewhat his position and so on. Earlier, the first book was very powerful, which I read. Slowly, he was sort of slipping out of thing, and then he became useless for me at a later date. You see, but apart from that, if we shift to indigenous position, that modern law is definitely borrowed and imitation and so on, which it is. We seem to fall into a fire, from frying pan into the fire. This is what, because they have what I suggested between 1757 and 1857, the idea of culture, tradition they have constructed is become so strong and so naturalized. And this is what many scholars like Ashish Nandi and then take off and critique the modern secular Western model. He said what they seem to mean indigenous is the tradition constructed in the 18th century. You see? And singular, monolithic, Brahmanical model. You see? And for many of us, we will say that better than that is that this imitation is better. Imitation is better. So what we need to develop is what is the plurality or the diversity that was available here, and what was the principle, what is the basic of law that was available among the people, and make it as a template for pasting this modern law onto us. You see, elsewhere somewhere I argued modernity of egalitarian and rationalism and all that kind of thing is not a monopoly of a single block of the country or a culture and so on. What all the West has done is, it has formulated it better, and very often for us it is easy to keep on doing that. In fact, every culture, Every culture or a group of cultures is an accommodation of conflicting forces, conflicting dynamics, conflicting views and ways of life and so on. And when we say it is a culture, that means many of the conflicts, struggles for power and for privileges get submerged and a unified some kind of picture is produced. This is this culture, that culture and all that kind of thing. Now if you undo that package, then you will find certainly instances which today we call Western, modern and so on. You see? Even last week I was hearing there is a Western way of thinking and an Eastern way of, the celebrated Professor A.K. Ramanujam and the Western way of thinking is content specific and the Eastern way of thinking is context specific. Context specificity was such a camouflaged and euphemism to say that if the Brahmin kills, shave off his hair, if a Pariah kills, cut off his head. See, that's a context he was suggesting. But my point in that is that content specificity was also available in India through what is known as, what you are trying to push back as a Shramanic culture, that what goes in India as a valuable thing is your achievement, not your caste ascription. It is by simply submerging this and hiding this and all that kind of thing, we come to an understanding. This colonially valorized, retrieved and so on is a singular monolithic culture. You see? So we need, in order to locate law, etc., we need to go back to history, sociology and politics in order to unearth this and then contextualize it and find a resonance of within our culture to what this modernity is coming. It's like a folders, local cultures, and you have the files coming and naturally sit within that. So it has to be basically a spring from within. Basically a spring from within, of course supported and reformulated by the West and so on. To some extent, say we are doing that. In which case it would not look like imported thing. It is a harking back to something what we originally had and lost and some people try to do and so on. This is a little bit hermeneutical and a kind of phenomenological exercises which are required moving away from this positivist empirical kind of framework and so on and so forth. This has to be very clearly understood, and the implication of this is not only to law but in religion but in other things also it comes out. This is a very, very convoluted task which not one man individually I can only suggest and see that, but a much larger group will have to engage in.
I'm just wondering where do you place linguistic identities and the emergence of linguistic nationalism, etc., in your formulation of the entire, because that is also part of the historical process, it's not just an idea. So where does that figure in your list?
Certainly language is a very, very important thing. See, when we say, for example, some of us also imagine and we formulate, modernity means brush aside the whole of the past and then something new emerges like that. It is not exactly like that. As I also suggested, the alternative tradition should be tapped. Language has been, across the globe, language has been a vehicle which indicates certain inclusivity, certain secularity and certain necessary social and political medium of knitting the people together. It's not by saying that this language is that. No, the language has to pass through the process of modernization, in the sense modernization, not institution building, the community becoming modern. Language needs to be constructed. It's not that language we have today requires to pass through several stages and so on. I do believe language indicates a certain secularity, and secularity is basic to modernity, and language could be a very, very important potential medium for constructing a wholesome social unity through which several other things can definitely be solved. I do believe that.
Historical process that has happened in India. So in your entire narrative, that seemed to be missing. Like if you start...
Oh yes, there are several things. See, the historical narrative, you will see that, there is one region on regionalism by Subbarao, and there are several others, and then that earlier, it's a Subbarao's personality of India. And 1950-56, and the question was linguistic organization of states was going on. Baroda University did quite a bit of work. Group of people, Riker and the Subbarao, M.N. Srini was also involved in that and so on. Historically, what we see is, and I suggested about the discovery of Sanskrit, discovery how the whole language, all the language is supposed to be part of the, derived from this and so on. Historically, what we find, certain languages have been submerged. Certain languages have been submerged, and this could not be done to certain other languages, particularly in the south. But the creation of Hindi, that has sort of what you call overwhelmed the whole narrative. And what we are suggesting is this, that India is one, spoken different. India has one language, spoken and written differently. This is the ideological position. So the linguism and linguistic thing, particularly taking off from Kupchandani and all that, but contesting Kupchandani's argument, that North is based on religion and South is based on language. And in Europe, Southern Europe is based on religion and Northern Europe based on polity and civility and so on. So we follow we don't have to follow their language and so on. But I do see language has a uniform role to play in all people's either knitting or splitting and so on. So in which case, language, as I said, today we have created a Varnashrama Dharmic language of structural one above the other. We need to reconstruct our own language and also retrieve the egalitarian perspective from within the language. That much I could say. I don't know what other things you want to find out.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes.
Sir, good afternoon. So this question pertains to Jallikattu. So there are two schools which are against it. The one school which is against it says that just because since Dalits are participating, no Brahmin and no other person from a higher caste participates, that's why this should be disbanded. The other school says that be that as it may, let anybody participate, since this is such a brutal cruelty done to an animal, nobody should participate in it. So I belong to the second school. So I was interacting with the people who subscribe to the first school, and they told me, no, this is a Brahminical concept of cruelty. So how do you see it? Let it be any concept of cruelty, any definition of cruelty. So just giving this notion, this is basically justifying a very gruesome cruelty in the name of caste. Because Brahmins are against it, that's why, because Brahmins or any other person belonging to this particular caste are against it, that's why people are finding ways to conduct it. So I see that people have gone, and I mean, this is very difficult for me to frame it in a very sentence, but I see that people are such a hypocrite. I will be blunt. People are hypocrite. I mean, if they just have a little sentiment about emotions, if they have little values about what the cruelty means, what the exploitation done to animals is, they will never support it. What are your views on it, sir?
In a world of fraud and cruelty, you are highlighting one minor fraud and cruelty and asking my opinion on that. You see, we can solve 3G gate, we can solve the coal gate, but who is to solve the India gate? You cannot isolate one out of the whole thing and you have to take a radical position on this or that. The various elements you did point out are present there, definitely. You see, various elements are present there. But far more cruel things and 100 times, 1,000 times, worse things, more worse things are happening. And by this I am not at all minimizing the cruelty to the animals. But cruelty to the animals also carried to a very large extreme, to the ideological, philosophical, ontological extent. For example, a few years ago in Delhi, they had a conference on poultry. In India, everything is politics. Everything is determined by politics. They had a poultry conference. So you found a huge demonstration right outside the venue by Jain monks. Jain monks, you are doing cruelty to the animals by producing poultry and so on. You let the animals run around and do. How do you feed all the people? Why do all people should be fed by eggs? They lay limited eggs and limited people are supposed to pay, which is an indirect argument of the Okat only. You see, direct argument. So very often this comes out. Hey. Cruelty to the animals definitely is an extension of our increasingly expanding understanding of human rights, rights general and all that kind of thing. I definitely agree. But picking out this one issue NGOs, there are one issue NGOs, and then raise that if the dam displaced should be placed in a level of Swedish people or something, their remuneration given to them should be a par with something. It's not like, the whole thing is a rotten thing. Jallikattu needs to be modernized. I have no doubt about that. But who is to modernize that? How is going to be modernized that? These are all questions. You see, when you have a nation state set up, there needs to be a conscious intellectual exercises in forums like this, exploring what is rational, what is inclusive, how do we extend our humane way of life, not only first and foremost among ourselves, and then to others, has to be explored. Nothing of the sort has been initiated at all in the country. Nothing of the sort of initiated at all in this country. So, what all these guys sitting in Bombay having some idea about, animal cruelty and all that, it's okay, we do agree to that. And it's also, unfortunately, it's not only sponsored by Brahmins, it's sponsored by other people also. It's not a monopoly of the Brahmins to have all that kind of thing. So, the issues involved is that who is to reconstruct Jallikattu, and how it is to be reconstructed, and how it is going to be reenacted. Whether it should be abolished or not will have to be decided. And this also has to be in the context of all cultures and all kind of other countries and cultures having similar thing. Similar to the Jallikattu or even worse than Jallikattu. I am not justifying that. I am saying contextualizing that. And through that progress will certainly to be made.
Yes. Very little, just 1 minute. Yeah. So, beat any culture. So, suppose if a bull is killed, 20 to 30 people, they try to insert rods on the anus of the bull. So, beat any culture. Can it be justified on the account of any culture?
Untouchability cannot be justified. That is first among human beings. Definitely, by this I am not saying that is not justified. That is not justified, definitely. But it should be an extension, not an isolated lifting and touching. When the same thing is done to women, where is the voice? Same voice. You see, that we fail to see. It's only, there are certain gradations, The human beings, while the ideology of the West may be that human beings are sharply divided from the non-human beings, and our thing is, including the all beings, that hitaya for everybody and all that kind of thing. But the practical thing is, most people in the country have been eating fish and eating meat and so on. And as late as 1938, I have graphic descriptions, very graphic descriptions, printed, published in India, in Tamil by Periyar, condemning what is conducted as yajna. You see, it's not the monopoly of some community subjecting to that. It's a rational man objects to that. Rational man. And the killing in yajna is not the same as butchering. That at one stroke that it is finished and then you eat the flesh and all that. It is a ritualist killing that lasts for as long as. It is 1938 I am saying. conducted publicly in Kumbakonam and Chennai in several parts and so on, by the same group of people whom we say the monopoly opposition to animal cruelty and so on. I'm not, this is because the reference you gave to the Brahmins, I'm not trying to pursue that. These are all things to be brought in. But the very basic thing is sort of at stake. Other people don't have an interest to take in these extreme things. That's all. But ideologically, what you call in terms of framework, what you are suggesting, definitely, not only Jallikattu, several other things, cockfight, what is a cockfight and all that. So all these pre-modern practices will have to be made more rationalized and humanized and so on. But we are not willing to humanize our own society. There's no human rights in this country, you know. I tell you, there is no human. The human rights discourse, you can only vest rights on humans, na? But if a society has only superhumans and subhumans and the singular human has not emerged, what do you do with rights? Of course, you have to be under law, case, court. Human rights is surrounding that only. Here there's no human rights. Even a senior professor will not ask of my right to go abroad. You can sign it. Sir, thoda sa sign kar dijiye na sir, please sir. Tomorrow I am leaving. I'm telling you from actual practice. So we have developed several ways of, instead of rights negotiation, the structural transformation and the cultural recasting, which is necessary prior to the modern law, prior to various other things, has not taken place. And nobody highlights that. Social change does not being highlighted at all. Existing thing as it is, let us say anybody makes a noise, we'll do that, we'll patch up that. But then see the result, it is becoming more and more out of hand. More and more out of hand. I've been telling this in HCU and telling this, it is this forum and this syllabus and these institutions of so-called higher earning or learning, I don't know. But this is where some possibility has to emerge. Changing the syllabus, changing the academic and point out the lacunae and all that. Because outside we are all done for. The whole of our struggle is for earning livelihood. You see? I tend to wander. Please, so tell me, anybody else asking something? What happened?
So I had a question on identity. So on one hand, obviously there is the interest of, now by identity I mean to include the existence, construction and understanding of this term, identity, with respect to be it caste, tribe or any other form of linguistic identity that might exist. Now, my question is, when we look at the term identity in all these spheres, do we want to have a malleable form of identity which in some sense allows for inclusivity? Let's say the understanding of tribe in some places was malleable, like you can move from one tribe to the other, or caste is malleable in some sense. But is there a risk in some sense of ignoring or essentially the existence of that identity itself by allowing it to be more inclusive? In a sense, it becomes a very Theseus-ship kind of an argument, because while obviously you want individuals to be able to be included, the existence of identity as a form itself is not inclusionary in nature, because by ascertaining something is something, you are by default saying that there is another thing that is not within that schema of things, right? So if we do have a more malleable understanding of that thing, then doesn't it cease to become its own identity? Like, do we start erasing our own conception of identity and making it just like a dust in the wind, so that there is no identity at all? Like, is that the goal that we should strive towards, or is there some culture or some place that we have to I don't know, how do we balance both these interests? Is what my
This question of identity, yesterday I took a class in a course called identity and so on. So it will be long to go into that, except to say a certain comments on this. I simply tell you an incident and then you'll understand that. There was a seminar on identity in India, in Delhi, okay? And we were all participating, Dalit identity, tribal identity, this identity, that identity and all that. And the importance of it and how it works and all that. It was an international seminar and there were some Japanese also participants and all that. So after the break of the seminar, we all went to take lunch, and we were standing in a queue. Right in front of me was a Japanese student, and I sort of tapped his shoulder and said, "What is your identity?" He turned like that. I had to defend myself. I may be hit and all that. He said, "I am a Japanese." I tried to further provoke him. They say, "No, there may be an Okinawan, there may be a Burakumin." No, there is nothing like that. So if I didn't spare him. So you came to see here identities, how they operate, which is not there, which is not desired in your country. No, it is not like that. I want to sympathetically understand. Yes, I perfectly agree and all that. The point is, modernity question is a modern question. Modern question. In the pre-modern question, there is no identity. There are people who are known this way, that way, and all that. And the fights, when they fight each other, Armenians fought Arabs, this fellow, and all that. But in modernity, identity simply means coming together of culture and power. And this happens in the most holistic and wholesome manner in a national identity. Territory, inclusiveness, and commitment to a common cause, all that puts, then I become a Frenchman or a German or an Englishman and so on. Now in countries where such a wholesome identity has not developed, you will find the proliferation of a plethora of identities of all sorts, in order merely to fight for the scarce resources, scarce privileges and so on and so forth and so on like that. So the lacuna is how to bring about a more wholesome identity rather than what to do with this. Further, second question, since it is a modern phenomena, it is always a constructed phenomena. And whom do you define as a Naga or whom do you define as this or that is a political will attaching for today and tomorrow, not what you had been allegedly supposed to be there. I guess you are in the part of northeastern part, and day by day the complaint is that number of people aligning themselves as Nagas is increasing. The problem for the Manipuri Meiteis was some 10 years ago you said so many tribes are Nagas. Now there is double the number of tribes claim they are Nagas. It is a political will. A Dalit comes and then says, whom we call Dalit and normally known as Dalit, he says, I am a Tamil. No, yaar, you are a Dalit. Now what do you say? What is his identity? What he calls himself, asserts himself as his identity, or what the government categorizes as identity. This is very, very important. Very important. In India, government sets the tone for most of the identities and we take off from there. Academics also takes off from that. And this is for the public civic action. You post yourself this and you will be given some privileges. But that seems to expand and engulf the entire your life. You become this and nothing else. I did a small experiment. My own friends, I called once, hey Dalit, why don't you come here? Huh? What? Dalit? You call me Dalit? Aren't you? Aren't you aligning? Aren't you mobilizing yourself? Aren't you? Yeah, that's all okay, but you calling me? An identity in an earlier discourse is something which you want to be, by which you want to be known, by which you are proud of, and which is sort of you are welcoming others. If you fall in within this, we are inclusive and all that. But here, this is a thing set up for the sake of appropriating certain benefits with the state. And so you rightly say that it has to be it's a political, who can become for example, Sonia Gandhi is an Indian. A daughter-in-law is a daughter. But it's a myth, it's a legal myth. But she's a daughter, but in-law. It's something like that, I can become a Naga, and I should be, and I will be treated as a Naga if I go through the procedure of certain things and all of that. So that should always be open. But many of the implications of identity problem for all these things are actually not discussed, not unearthed. It's mostly in terms of state negotiation, with the state negotiation. And state negotiation has become something that dominates your entire life, which is another way of saying that state in India is actually totalitarian. We used to say that Soviet Russia was a totalitarian, but here around the state everything moves. And the entire academics, till recently, even today, a large extent, is a monopoly of the state. You see? And there are so many other things by which, there is a Lolly Jenkins, he say how the state determines and nurtures and promotes the ideology of identification and how it is being devious, harmful to our country and so on. There are some implications for that. I'll highlight more on that, you can see later. So, you want to conclude?
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's already lunchtime.
One last thing with respect to what he said about Jallikattu being a Dalit sport. So I just wanted to clarify that I think your conceptualization of the question is wrong, because even if you do a prima facie Google search, you'll actually see that Jallikattu in Tamil Nadu was actually a dominant caste, Tevar caste practice, I think. So I did my project on this, and even participation of Dalits in the sport is a mere tokenism, as far as my project said. But then I talked to Kannan sir, who's actually from Tamil Nadu, and he said this is not so, but even Dalits are allowed into the sport. But the point is you can't just place the onus on just the Dalits as to why you're undergoing untouchability. Why are you not protesting Jallikattu?
No, this is perpetuated by also certain academicians and projecting it as a part of academics. That is the way he was trying to point out.
Yeah. I would like to thank Professor Aloysius for coming down to Nalsar and speaking to us. And thank you so much, sir, for your perspective talk. On behalf of the organizing team, my sincere thanks to the institution for accommodating the talk, professors and all the participants for the engagement. Thank you, everyone.